Our next step is going to be sewing on our pockets. One quick note before you move on, it's important that you recognize that you sewed 2 fronts together with 2 backs. And even though I've trimmed my seam allowance, I can still tell what my front and what my back is without the notches, because remember that the back always has the bigger swoop, whereas the front has the smaller angled swoop. So these are 2 fronts, these are 2 backs. These are not pants. So when you're sewing this together, make sure that you are not sewing the sides here, because then you'd be sewing 2 fronts to 2 backs. So just to kind of understand this on a ready to wear garment, here's a pair of pants. What you sewed together was this section up here. So 2 fronts together. So you sewed this seam that runs down the front and then up the back. So the 2 backs are together here. All right. You do not have legs. These are not pants yet. So if you're starting to panic, don't. We're going to fold them into pants after we put on our pockets. All right. So you have 4 pocket pieces. And if we take a look at the directions, it says to stitch 1 pocket piece to each front and each back at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So in order to do this, we are going to match up a couple of things. Let's start by unfolding our fronts. We're going to lay our front right side up so that when we put our pocket pieces on, it's right sides together. Taking one of our pocket pieces, we are going to line up the cut edge of our front with the cut edge of our pocket. Some other things you have to line up are your notches and the marking, so your dots that you put on the wrong side of the fabric. We're going to pay closer attention to those here in a minute later on, but right now you can tell that they're matched up, and you've matched up the cut edge and you've also matched up the notch. So I'm going to pin this in place. Again, the only part that you care about matching up is making sure that the side that you're sewing, so from here to here, is lined up, the cut edges are matching. Then take a second pocket piece and match it up so your right sides are together on the left side. You are matching the notches and the cut edges just as we did on the other side. Let's sew these 2 on first before we pin our other 2 pocket pieces to our back. To stitch our pocket pieces on, the directions told us to specifically use a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Instead of lining up the edge of our fabric with the 5/8 inch mark, we're going to use the 3/8 inch mark. The 3/8 inch mark is marked on your bobbin case and in front of it. Line up the edge of your fabric with 3/8 of an inch. In this case, because our pocket isn't going to be stretched, you don't need to necessarily use a stretch stitch. You can if you want to, but a straight stitch will work fine here as well. Keeping your fabric lined up at 3/8 of an inch, you're going to sew on your pocket. Because this part of the pocket doesn't get a lot of wear and tear, and we are going to do some top stitching later on, and we use a 3/8 inch seam allowance, we're not going to seam finish where we sewed our pocket on to our front or our back. So just a plain seam at 3/8 of an inch is what you're going to do for all 4 pocket pieces. Let's pin them on the back. This is what we just completed, our pockets on the front of our pants. Now we need to find the back and those side notches. So maneuver your fabric around so that you're taking a look at the back pieces. A good indication that you're in the right spot is you should have 2 notches on the top and 2 notches on the side, because those are the ones that we're gonna match up our pocket pieces with. Taking your other pocket piece, this is your third one, you are going to line it up the same way we did on the front of our pants by matching up the raw edges and the notches on the side seams. Just as we did with our front pieces, we're gonna sew these at 3/8 inch of a seam allowance. So here, or even on the edge of the presser foot is 3/8. Line up your fabric and stitch your pocket pieces onto the back. When finished sewing, this is what your front and your back pieces will look like. Pocket, back piece, pocket. Remember that step 3 was 2 parts. The first one was to put the pockets on and sew them. The second one is to press it. So the rest of step 3 says to press the seam towards the pocket, pressing the pocket out. Before we start ironing, please make sure that you took a look at the end of your bolt for the fabric that you purchased. Depending on your fabric and what fiber it's made out of will determine if it can be ironed. My fabric can be ironed, but on a low setting. So if you take a look at your iron, yours may be a little bit different than mine, but there should be some kind of heat setting on it. Mine is a dial here in the middle. So I'm gonna turn mine to in between the silk and the nylon. My fabric is a blend, a cotton polyester blend. So the polyester in this fabric is going to melt if I put my iron on high heat and go to iron it. So make sure you adjust that. If you ever wanna know, like before you melt your fabric, test it out on a small scrap that you have left over from cutting out your pieces before you actually iron your project. So back to the step, it tells us to press the seam towards the pocket, pressing the pocket out. So right now I have a seam here and a seam here where my pockets are sewn on. So it says to press the pocket out, and it gives you a little visual. It's a second picture of step 3 that you should have the pocket pulled out. Here's the pant leg and the pocket. So we're gonna untuck our pocket, and then it tells us to press the seam allowance towards the pocket. So you're gonna iron the seam allowance towards the pocket. And since you have 4 pocket pieces, you're gonna repeat this 3 other times.